Welcome to the Crafted Conversation, the voice of the crafted concept, brought to you by me, Marcus Sharrod. The Crafted Conversation is my opportunity to speak and give credence to guests from the world of education, educational leadership, elite leadership in general, and of course elite sport, for instructors, those interested in instructional methods and imparting learning, to come and explore, be curious and be open-minded, how we can, as instructors, be better in the way that we package learning for our elite athletes and our pupils. The crafted concept is underpinned by the idea of a learning environment, what that environment, what the culture, what the setting looks like. Learning design, so how we actually piece together what our considerations are around the way that we package that learning piece. And finally, learning critique. How open are we? How curious are we to find out what our learners actually know? How can they be flexible in the way they apply what they know? How has that learning become durable? And the same for our pupils, and indeed for our colleagues, for those of us that are acting in leadership positions. So without further ado, we'll get on with today's episode of the Crafted Conversation. Welcome back to my regular listeners. Good to have you. Let's get on with it. Welcome back to the Crafted Conversation with me, Marcus Sharrod. This is a short snippet for you this week, and I'd like to give a shout out actually to a colleague in Perth, Australia, originally from Huddersfield. I mean, that is a big switch, right? From West Yorkshire all the way to Western Australia. Jamie Clark, you are a pedagogical and digital learning leader in K-12 school in Perth, Western Australia. And I appreciate you, mate, because you have produced this, the Teaching One-Pagers book. This book is a fantastic summary of all of the major elements of instructional and classroom practice that are going to exponentially improve your instructional processes in the classroom, my educational colleagues. And this is exactly the kind of work that needs to be better translated into the elite sport environment. And that is where the crafted concept is cutting edge. So for my regular listeners who work in the elite sport world, you know where I am, Marcus at thecraftedconcept.co.uk, or grab me on LinkedIn, Marcus Sharrod. I am the one to come into your environment, as I have done in so many: performance football, Olympic, Paralympic sports, performance rugby. I can transform your instructional processes as a coaching network. This is a brief pause in today's crafted conversation to talk about how the crafted concept, the overarching business that supports the crafted conversation, both in newsletter and in podcast form, can best support you in your performance environments. The crafted concept has experience working in the education and elite sports sectors through performance coaching for individuals or for teams, the learning environment, by focusing on those three pillars of the crafted concept of performance: learning environment, learning design, and learning critique. Contact me directly because I can help you, as I have done on many occasions, developing a sense of cohesion within the team. Performance coaching aims to drive individuals and teams to excel. And as a performance coach, I am an expert in areas of teaching and learning, instructional design, motivational psychology, team development, performance culture and environment, and performance mindset. It's my job to generate activities, use questioning, listening, observing, probing techniques to deliberately seek feedback and present opportunities for lateral thinking and inspire growth and ideas for you as an individual or for the performance of the team and the collective. The crafted concept is your accountability partner, is your critical observer. I'm able to draw upon experiences as an expert teacher and instructor, and as an expertly qualified executive coach, performance coach with over 100 hours worth of coaching experience. As a coach developer in elite sport, I can support and guide coaches through the complexities of your professional development, of your professional environment, offering structure and assisting you in refining your skills through learning environment, learning design, and learning critique. Contact me directly, Marcus at thecraftedconcept.co.uk, or look me up on LinkedIn, Marcus Sharrod. So I just wanted to grab a couple of elements actually and give a nod to that for, I'm not really talking to my educational professionals here, because if you're even remotely worth your salt in the classroom, you'll have already heard of checking for understanding, and think, pair, share as two examples of great instructional practice that we employ regularly in our classrooms, heralded by our good friend over in America, Doug Lemov, in his wonderful work around teaching like a champion and the kind of practice that we can employ in our classrooms. But I just wanted to give a really quick summary of these two particular tactics and strategies that can be used by head coaches. And before I do so, these are two. The reason I picked these two is because actually they are immediately actionable for any coaching environment. And not just that, I can give recent examples of how I've been able to implement strategies like these into a performance football environment that have transformed the engagement of the players in the squad in team meetings. Head coach I'm working with, really forward thinking, talented head coach who I have no doubt in the very near future is going to find themselves in a championship job at a minimum. And this individual, curious, open-minded, willing to learn, all the things that you want from a modern head coach. And they couldn't believe how much more they were able to learn about what the lads in the squad knew as a result of giving them the platform and actually checking before the team meeting continues, are you with me? Are we here? Who's listening? Who's not? And I'll go on to explain a little bit more about that in just a second. So look, before we continue, a nod to Keynote Educational. Keynote are the partner of the Crafted Conversation podcast and newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter at www.thecraftedconcept.co.uk, where the subscribe button can't be missed. And Keynote Education have got a range of conferences, of in-person and online courses to develop your practice as an educational practitioner. At a departmental level, as a teacher looking to improve your departmental knowledge on the exam board that you teach and deliver, or whether you're an aspiring leader, middle leader, senior leader, or existing middle leader, senior leader, outstanding heads of department, pastoral leadership, you name it, they've got it. Forthcoming conference on special educational needs in London is pretty much at sellout. So get yourself over to keynoteeducational.co.uk and enter the code CRAFTED10, CRAFTED10, CRAFTED10 to get your 10% discount off any in-person event run by Keynote Educational. And that is a gift for my regular listeners. So back to today's conversation, I want to start for checking for understanding. What is checking for understanding? Well, we've all been in positions where we're stood in front of a group, in front of a class, in front of a group of players, of performers, and in doing so, we deliver information, we deliver instruction. And the assumption is at all times, and I'm sorry to say the incorrect assumption at all times, is that we assume that everyone's listening. Everyone's listening and everyone understands. But of course, that may not be the case. And in order to check for understanding, there are a few things that we can do that are really effective. Before continuing with an activity of some sort, or say we're delivering a video analysis and we're talking about how our opposition at the weekend can hurt us in possession, then we might say, oh, their left back likes to get on the overlap and the left winger drives inside. He rolls inside all the time and creates almost a second 10 position and takes up those areas between sort of sat on top of our number 6 holding midfielder and trying to draw inside the fullback to create space for their fullback. I've said all that. All that makes sense. Those with a football vernacular, you followed that. It makes total sense to you. You've probably got the ability to picture that as a mental visual image. And that would be a great opportunity for me to say you should listen to last week's episode on storytelling. But back to today, how do we know everyone's understood that? How do we know everyone is listening, is understood? How often do we just progress our narrative, progress our presentation on that assumption?
And they can be those tiny differences that come Saturday cause the slight mental lapse, cause the mistake, the faulty process that leads to the goal that means you lose 2-1. So instead, we need to wait, pause. This is important information. And I am unapologetically going to make sure that you've processed and understood that information. And so I'm going to ask a few questions. And not only am I going to ask questions, I'm going to ask questions in such a manner that I want the response to come from any random source. What does that mean, Marcus? It means rather than asking a question in a vacuum to an open room where either the most outspoken, the person who feels a sense of leadership, so the captain or vice captain, leadership group, feel, oh, in my role, I need to be the one that responds to this question. So rather than having actually a very small sample size who understand, and this is the next big mistake, if we are good enough to not just move on after presenting information on the assumption people understand, because we understand, we're the instructor and we understand. So if our knowledge is there, then theirs must be there. If you're good enough to check, but you only check by asking a question to the room, then the room is not going to respond. A very small 10, 15% of the room will be willing to respond. And if we then go, great, I've got the answer I'm looking for, move on, we've made the second mistake. If 10 to 15% of the room understand, then in a team game, in rugby union, in netball, in hockey, in football, that means that essentially 8 players on the field, 10 players on the field, 11 players on the field in rugby union that may not understand. They might, but they might not. And if they don't, faulty processes, mistakes, leaking goals, leaking tries, leaking baskets, we're going to lose. So I need to ask more than one question. I need to ask a question in a way that engages everybody. And so rather than just saying, is that okay? Does everyone get that? Is that all right? I'm going to say, what in our defensive strategy would prove to be the most successful way to combat this overlap and driving inside on the left-hand side that the opposition team employ? And I leave that question there. And then I've got 2 options. Option 1 would be to randomly name someone in the room to answer the question. And trust me, that sense of cold calling on someone, if you do that often enough and it becomes embedded within your practice, everyone in the room is going to be shitting themselves that you're going to ask them the question. And what does that do, colleagues? That means that everyone in the room, it has to be ready with an answer. They can't switch off because, don't worry, the captain will do it. Don't worry, the outspoken one at the back will do it. It could be you. And if it could be you, you need an answer. And if you need an answer, you need to think. And thinking is learning. And learning is progress. Progress is performance. The next opportunity that you might have would be to ask the room an open question, one that makes them think, present a problem, ask something like, what might be a flaw in their strategy? If we're able to defensively turn over the ball quickly, what's the flaw in their strategy? What examples of previous performances, previous teams we played against, can you give that are similar to this? In the worst case scenario, how could this hurt us? And once you've asked that question, if you don't randomly assign someone within the room to answer, then your other option is to get people to, as I describe it, turn and burn, think, pair, share, so that they can collaborate, gain confidence from others, hear others' responses. But essentially, if you're asking people to speak in groups of 2 or 3, then everyone is going to be accountable to a response. And the other thing that we gain from that, of course, is by setting some sort of task orientation, I, as the coach, can circulate the room. Me and my assistant coach we can circulate the room, we can listen to the responses. And in listening to the responses, I can notice those that can give an answer who perhaps usually wouldn't. Or, better still, I can see those who are non-contributors to that conversation. And that means that either in that moment or later on, I can put an arm around them and I can ask additional questions to find out whether they actually don't know or whether they're, even in that smaller 2 to 3 person environment, genuinely shy to give their response. The positive thing about doing it in the moment, if it can be a quiet one-to-one, is that if they give a correct response, I can then foreground that in front of the group to help them to gain confidence. If it's the very quiet individual, or it's the youngster who's recently broken into the squad, or the newly signed individual who doesn't want to make it within that social construct, that social environment, they gain capital from getting things right, but they can't risk getting things wrong because they might get ripped by the lads, then they may stay quiet. But by asking that individual question, by observing that, by setting the task orientation, discussing your groups, or write down some responses. There's some pens and paper, sit down on small tables in groups of no more than 3 and write a response. I can lean over their shoulder, ask them a couple of additional questions, probing questions. And of course, in asking those probing questions, if I get the response I'm looking for, I've got an opportunity to really support their confidence. And I could do that publicly because that gains traction within the group. It says to the group, this person is engaged. This new person in the group, which automatically is a threat because the sense of ancestral, tribal, they're new to the group, I don't understand them yet. Then we're starting to move that towards they're not new to the group, they're becoming part of the group. They are us, not them. Checking for understanding may be more than just asking the question with a cold call or asking the think, pair, share. And this is where time is one of our most precious commodities. We know that in an elite sport environment. I work with National League North Club, who are part-time. They've only got 2 training sessions a week. Quite often at this stage of the season, one of those is taken up by a match that needs to be played that's been called off earlier in the season. Time is the most precious commodity, and therefore dedicating more time to longer team meetings, which on the face of it, lads aren't sure they want to do. On many occasions, it may be a sense that people have negative experiences of school, which they ascribe to a classroom environment. Then we've got a problem. But by giving that extra 10 minutes to check for understanding and not just ask the first question, but then when someone gives a response from the cold call, turn to someone else and say, so what does that mean if we turn the ball over in the mid phase? Or asking that second question and then going to think, pair, share, then we're gaining a deeper sense of understanding, a deeper sense of confidence in the knowledge we already possess as a group, as a unit, to problem solve on the pitch. And problem solving on the pitch with a non-reliance on the coach, who of course can't do anything on the pitch, means we're going to gain performance. The more that an instructional coaching environment can mirror that of a really dynamic educational classroom, the greater learning we're going to implement, and the more learning, the more opportunities for performance. So before we go, I have a question that came in to my LinkedIn DM. As you know, I'd love to get your questions. I love receiving questions, and my favorite, the one that sort of engages me and makes me the most inquisitive across the week, I will potentially read out on the podcast. And the one I've got today has come from a coaching colleague in the world of rugby union, actually, who says, based on last week's episode of storytelling, I'm trying, how can I draw on the past? How can I draw on my rugby club's past when we aren't a professional club? We've never been professional. We play in the lower sort of leagues, the lower rungs, if you like, more of a regional level. How can I draw on my club's past to create a wider sense of story? And that's a great question, because history gives us stories. History is story. It is narrative. And so ask questions. Be curious. Ask the treasurer the club secretary, the individual who works behind the bar for free because they're a volunteer and they come and open up and lift up the shutters and serve a few pints and order the next barrel of Guinness that's needed for free. Those are the individuals who've been in and around your club environment far longer than you. They far predate you, and they will have answers to the questions you need. What's the greatest success that this club's ever had? Who are the greatest players that played during the 1980s? Team photographs. Sports clubs are really good at having team photographs through the ages. Find someone who knows who these people are. Discover some stories about them. Try and draw on the past of the club. Even go to the local council. It may be that the council have got some kind of archives of results, of newspaper clippings, of anything. Now, all of that requires work. Of course, you might say to me, bloody hell, Marcus, I'm a part-time coach. I do this, I'm not getting paid for this. I do this for a bit of a laugh. But if you truly want to engage those that are involved in your performance environment, even if it's at regional club rugby level, playing in the county league, if you want to engage your players to perform and to be part of something bigger than rocking up on a Saturday and having a few pints afterwards, then find out the answers to those questions. Be curious, be open-minded, be inquisitive, reach out in areas that you've never considered before. Look at the team photographs, go to the archives, speak to the local council, speak to the club treasurer, the secretary, the barman, the groundsman who's not really a groundsman, he just owns a big lawnmower. Anyone you can to tease out and draw on those stories and then present them back in the package of the values that you'd like to create as the leader of that current performance, the custodian, if you like, of that current performance environment. Because sports clubs are all bigger than us. So we come to the end of this week's podcast episode of The Crafted Conversation, also available in newsletter form by going to www.thecraftedconcept.co.uk and subscribe there, or indeed at the bottom in the show notes. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Marcus Sharrod. We're on Instagram at thecraftedconcept_, and also YouTube, The Crafted Concept, where the weekly newsletter content goes up in video form. If anything today is of interest to you and you want to get in touch with questions, if your question is read out on the podcast, I will get in touch back with you for your free 30-minute performance coaching consultation as a result of your question being curious enough and interesting enough to have been read out and addressed on the podcast. And equally, if any of the work of the Crafted Concept in performance coaching and consultancy with a particular focus on teaching and learning environments, learning design, and how we critique that learning for performance is of interest to you in the education or elite sports sector, then do get in touch. And you can do so directly via email, marcus@thecraftedconcept.co.uk. See you next time.